Just the two of you?
Okay, the time is now 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you could please rise and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Ms. Pollier.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. Clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg.
Here.
Hicks.
Here.
Mako.
Here.
Shapaka.
Here.
Suriano.
Here.
Tamarkin.
Here.
Okay, next item on the agenda, additions or correctives. Okay, hearing none. Next agenda item, approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from April 10th, 2024?
So moved by Hicks.
We have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Do we have a second?
Second, Greenberg.
Second by Mr. Greenberg. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make a note that Ms. Pollier is present for the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, clerk, roll call, please.
Hicks.
Yes.
Greenberg.
Yes.
Mako.
Yes.
Shapaka.
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
Tamarkin.
Yes.
Pollier.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next agenda item, we have an executive session. This next item is an executive session. Do I have a motion to go into the executive session under Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code to confer with the city attorney concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject to pending or imminent court action.
So moved by Hicks.
I have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Do I have a second?
Second, Polly.
A second by Ms. Pollier. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks.
Yes.
Polly.
Yes.
Mako.
Yes.
Chapaca.
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
Tamarkin.
Yes.
Greenberg.
Yes.
So for this executive session, I'd like the commission to be joined by our legal counsel in the conference room next door. Okay, our executive session is now over, so we'll return back to our regular agenda for the meeting. The next agenda item is to swear in applicants and speakers, and for that, I will recognize Mr. Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now at the public hearing portion of the meeting. The public hearing will operate as follows. Administrative staff will make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant or their representative may then make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant has 10 minutes to present, and additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Public comment will then be open for 3 minutes allowed per speaker. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Speakers must complete a speaker slip and come to the podium and state their name and address. The applicant will then be given 10 minutes to comment. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. If there is more than one application pending for a particular address, the presentation on each application may be consolidated and presented as one. At this time, will persons wishing to present testimony this evening please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, state I do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roth. We'll now move into the applications and public comment. The first application we have tonight is 140 North High Street, The Well. And it's a variance application. I'll read it into the record. We have case V-0007-2024 to consider a variance application to vary section 1163.02A, minimum number of parking spaces required for property located at 140 North High Street, parcel ID 025-000-135, current zoning OG-2, The Well, Joel Trainer applicant. I'll now recognize the administration for a presentation. Ms. Kapka?
The first application of the night is a variance at 140 North High Street. Here is a zoning map of the area. The site is zoned Old Gahanna Mixed-Use Neighborhood District. The applicant is requesting approval of a parking space reduction variance due to a change in use. There are currently 8 on-site parking spaces on the site. The site was previously used exclusively as an office, which requires 1 space per 350 square feet of gross floor area. This comes out to approximately 16 spaces. However, the site has been operating as a legal non-conforming site, so they were able to have 8 spaces, which is underneath the 16 that would have been required. However, the use is changing to a combination of office and event space / club rooms, and this change triggers the parking requirements, which must now either be met or a variance must be obtained. Since there are 2 uses in the building, each has separate parking requirements that are consolidated. So the office portion is 1 space per 350 square feet, and the club room portion is 1 space per 100 square feet, which comes out to a total of 28 parking spaces. The site is small, and with the building on site, there is no way for it to accommodate the 28 spaces that are required. There are no modifications proposed for the site at this time. The variance is just for existing conditions. Here's a site plan that was submitted by the applicant. This shows the location of the 8 spaces on site to the rear of the existing building. It also notes the location of 2 on-street parking spaces, which are not considered on-site, so they do not count towards the required parking. So there are just 8 spaces. Here is a photo that shows the location of parking that's in close proximity to the site. There are 14 on-street spaces along North High Street, and then approximately 4 to 5 unstriped spaces along Short Street. There is additional on-street parking to the north and south of the site as well, but these are just the spaces that are the closest. Here is a zoomed out photo showing some additional parking options that are near the site. The first is the Creekside parking garage to the west, and the second is a public surface parking lot to the south, both of which are within 150 yards of the site, which is within walking distance. Here is the specific variance that is being requested. It is to Chapter 1163.02A, which is minimum number of parking spaces required. As mentioned, the zoning code requires 28 on-site parking spaces for these uses, and the site currently only has 8 spaces. So the variance is for the 20-space deficit. Here's the variance criteria that must be met in order for the application to be approved. And staff recommends approval of the variance as submitted. The variance is for existing conditions on the lot that became nonconformities due to a change in use. There are no modifications to the site at this time. As shown, there are 14 on-street spaces in front of the building and additional parking along Short Street. There's also a public parking lot and garage within 150 yards of the site. And the applicant states that the 8 on-site spaces as well as 2 of the street spaces will be sufficient for their use for the majority of the time, and that a few times a month, 20 to 25 spaces will be necessary for various meetings. And during these times, the free public parking that's available can be utilized. Finally, the land use plan recommends using off-site parking to count towards parking space requirements in the Creekside area, which applies to this site. And with that, I turn it back to the commission.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kopka. We'll now open the public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? If you could come up to the podium, please state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
Good evening. My name is Matt Toddy, Principal Architect at Elevation Studios, 933 Taurus Avenue here in Gahanna. So I've been working with the client, the applicant, Joel Trainer, Three Creeks Church, to develop the application that was just presented. And I'll just briefly explain a little bit more about the project. Building is being purchased. It's a 2-story building existing. There are 8 spaces on the lot. The lot is fully built out, so there's no additional room anywhere for additional parking spaces to be added. The plan for the property is the second floor will primarily be administrative function, office space, and then the ground floor space is that change of use that's being applied for from general office to gathering space. Club room, I think, is what the code actually calls for, and that'll be used primarily for, the occasional after-hours small group meeting, bridal shower, something of something to that effect, youth group. So during the day, business hours, again, the 8 spaces are sufficient for the administrative office use on that second floor, with the occasional after-hours function being able to utilize the public parking nearby. So that I'd be happy to field any questions.
Okay. So first up, is there anyone from the public who'd like to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll open it up to the commission for questions. Starting on my left, Mr. Chapaka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, but we'll have a comment at that time.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Paulier?
I do have one question. The few times a month that you say there'll be, how many, 20 to 25 spaces will be used? And will those primarily be used for, like you just said, different events that people in the congregation and the community will be able to use the building for?
Correct.
Okay. How soon in advance of those times would you be notified, I guess, that somebody is going to be using that space and will be potentially utilizing the 20 to 25 additional spaces that you would need?
I presume that those events will be scheduled well in advance. Probably, there'll probably be a calendar that will be put together, including those events for months at a time. So it could be, I think it's safe to assume that it'll be able to be, forecast
Okay.
forward for several weeks at least.
Will people be notified then, the guests that are coming, will people be notified of where they could park?
Yes,
Will that
that
be
is the
part of
plan,
the-
that,
Okay.
those 2 public areas, the garage and the surface lot, I believe it's 2 blocks to the south on High Street, will be advertised as backup options.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hicks? No questions. Mr. Greenberg?
What times is that typically when they're going to meet? In the evening?
I think largely those functions will be evening, after hours, after business hours.
And are they typically Monday through Friday or Saturday and Sunday?
I think the occasional weekend gathering, a Saturday afternoon, maybe a Sunday evening would be would be, or could be expected as well.
Thank you.
Mrs. Triano?
No questions.
Mr. Markin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will you hold religious services in this building?
The plan is not. The church does have alternate location for Sunday gatherings, corporate service gatherings, so the plan is not to use this facility for that function.
Thank you.
All right, I don't have any questions on this. So, seeing other comments, do we have a motion to approve case V-007-2024?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move for approval, application V-0007-2024, variance application for 140 North High Street.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Greenberg. Is there a second?
Second, Chipaka?
Second by Mr. Shapaka. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I will be voting in favor of this. I think that the intent with the Gahanna parking garage satisfies not only this building, but other buildings that have the same situation. And again, voting in favor of.
Mr. Chair, I just have one comment. I'll also be voting in favor of this as well. I would just ask that, like I said in my question time, that this is well advertised. People that are coming from outside the city possibly and maybe aren't familiar with where to park in that area, be advised where they should be parking.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Chapaca,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Next application we have on the agenda is Crescent Woods. This is going to be a final plat application. Now we'll read it into the record. We have application FP-0001-2024 to recommend to council a final plat application for Crescent Woods consisting of 40.807 acres located on Hamilton Road. Parcel ID numbers 025-017173, 025-014172, and 025-013767. Current zoning L-MFPRD, SCPD, Griffin Caldwell applicant. Turn it over to the administration for a presentation, and Mr. Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Blackford. This particular item, it is a final plat. We don't see a lot of final plats, but we did see a preliminary plat for this request in August of last year. What you see on the screen right now, this is a location map. We have Hamilton Road on the left side or to the west, 270, Tech Center. Really, the property in question under the plat is here outlined in green. As you stated, Crescent Woods. Planning Commission has seen development occur on this property a number of times. The Crescent Woods multifamily project was before Planning Commission a few times over the last several years. Also, the Orthopedic One medical site was through Planning Commission as well. There was also a administrative lot split that occurred and the preliminary plat. And what you see on the screen is the proposed lot layout. What you may or may not know is that the state says when you build a road that has to be platted. So you can divide lots, you can create commercial drive, but roadways need to be platted. So the proposed development are 3 lots. This lot is about 17 acres. This one's about 7 acres. And I think this one's about 15 acres and then a roadway. What's unusual about the request is this is a recommendation to City Council. Again, the factors that we're looking at very different than the previous request or other requests tonight, and that is Planning Commission shall recommend approval of the plat to City Council if it's consistent with the preliminary plat and they're essentially the exact same site plan. If it's compliant with the zoning code. If it wasn't compliant with the zoning code, we'd have some companion applications like a variance. Zoning code really looks at lot size and lot frontage. This particular zoning, the SCPD, Select Commercial Plan District, Doesn't have a minimum frontage requirement. Minimum lot size is an acre, and again, 3 lots, smallest one being about 7 acres. So it meets all the minimum zoning requirements. And then the third one is if there's, the request is compliant with any specific provisions that Planning Commission placed on the preliminary plat, and there were no specific conditions on that preliminary plat. So staff does recommend approval with that. Very straightforward request. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. We will now open public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? Applicant not here. Okay. Anyone from the public like to comment on the application? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll open it up to the commission for comments or questions.
I have no questions for Mr. Blackford, so I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sure that'll be the case. Go ahead.
I also do not have any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Greenberg?
No questions.
I have one quick question for Mr. Blackford. Who's the applicant on this?
I believe it's Casto is the applicant, I believe, yes.
And is most of this land going to be the Casto property, the Casto development?
I believe there's a lot of different folks involved in that. They probably know the different arrangements better than I do. But yes, I would say that probably the majority of this particular parcel is more under their control than not.
Thank you.
Okay. I do have a couple questions. Hopefully you'll be able to answer these. Notice that a lot of what I would call just kind of blank easements shown on the plat. For instance, there's a notated 25-foot easement. Do we know what those easements pertain to?
I couldn't comment on easements because it's not the Department of Planning that looks at that. I can say that it's been through the proper reviewing channels, which includes, typically would be our engineering department that would look at easements and that, and this has been through a few reviews, and engineering has signed off, so it looks like they're okay with the easement language. Yes, sir.
Okay. I professionally have kind of a issue with that, but it is what it is. And then secondly, the Crescent Place, that's going to be a publicly dedicated right-of-way?
Yes, that will be, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Hearing no other questions, do I have a motion to approve FP-0001-2024?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion for approval of FP-0001-2024 plat for Crescent Woods.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Tamarkin. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Pollyea.
Second by Ms. Pollier. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Blackford said that we are to recommend to council to approve the plat. So just wanted to make that notation for our motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hearing no other discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Chapaca,
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is Sheets Lincoln Circle. We have 3 agenda items, and I'll read all these into the record. First, we have a conditional use application, and this is going to be CU-0002-2024 to consider a conditional use application for property located at 230 Granville Street, parcel ID 025-004250, current zoning CC, Sheets Lincoln Circle, DW route applicant. Then we have a design review case DR-0006-2024 to consider a design review application for site plan, landscaping, and building design for property located at 230 Granville Street, parcel ID 025-004250, current zoning CC, Sheets Lincoln Circle, DW route applicant. And then finally, we have a final development plan, case FDP-0005-2024, to consider a final development plan application for property located at 230 Granville Street, parcel ID 025-004250, current zoning CC, Sheets, Lincoln Circle, DW route, applicant. And with that, I will turn it over again to Mr. Blackford for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Blackford here again. On the screen is the location and zoning map for the last project on tonight's agenda. The site here is outlined in red. It's about 4.5 acres, or just over 4.5 acres. Frontage on Granville Street. Here in red, the star, that's the approximate location of the proposed building. It's in the site formerly occupied by Coaches. Here to the west, we have Mill Street. This would be, just again for context, Creekside, Granville Street running east-west. Just to the south, we have Strawberry Plaza, we have the Mighty Lion Car Wash, our newest development on that corridor, the library, and then again, Hamilton Road. This particular property is Zone CC, which is community commercial. Typical uses allowed by right in CC would be retail, office, medical-related uses. The site does not abut any residential property. It abuts mixed use to the west, which is labeled OG2 on your screen in blue. And Shoal Park is just to the north. That is also zoned community commercial as well. 3 applications before you tonight. Final development plan, that's really our site layout, so where things are located. Design review, that's the vertical side of things, so building materials and colors. Landscaping, and then we have a conditional use, and that is specific to a gas station. So again, community commercial is the zoning, gas station is a conditional use, meaning that it's appropriate in some instances, but not all. That's why it's not allowed by right. The site is just over 4.5 acres, but a lot split is contemplated. This would be sort of that middle piece, about 1.25 acres in size. Building's just under 5,000 square feet. It is a restaurant retail building, no drive-through. So if we remember our Sheets application from about 1.5 years ago with the Morris and Johnstown location, that was a much larger scale project that included a drive-through. This one does not. Exterior building materials, brick and masonry veneer. There is a metal roof. It's red, I think, over the cupola, and dark bronze with the mechanical screening. The fuel canopy will match the building, masonry, base, bronze, and then the canopy is red. All the parking is to the side and rear, and there's about 9 more spaces than what the code would require. On your screen is the site plan, part of your final development plan package. Bottom of the screen, this would be Granville Street. Top of your screen, or north, that would be Shoal Park. Here outlined in red is the proposed building, in just under 5,000 square feet. Meeting the required setbacks, there's a 10-foot setback on the north side of the building and on the west side of the building. In blue is the canopy. In Granville Street, sort of a landscaped tree lawn, parking, canopy, parking, building. One thing that I think is really important to point out on this particular site plan, or 2 things, is the addition of a 6-foot wide sidewalk from Granville back to Shoal Park. One does not exist on either side of that driveway leading back. Also, there are 4 access points providing interconnectivity to those adjacent sites. 2 to the west, which would be the drive-through beverage, among others, and then 2 to the east, which would be along the access drive, and O'Toole's, among others, are just off to the right there, to the east. These access points are slightly modified from the existing access points, but there are 2 on each side of the property today. Another site plan for us to look at. Really, this one's going to point out all the landscaping that they're providing. So that's a big part of the design review application, is looking at the various landscaping requirements. And this request does meet or exceed those minimum standards. 1,500 square feet of landscaping is required in the parking area. They're providing 1,600. 16 trees need to be planted, and you can see here from site plan, landscape islands with plantings. There is a 3-foot screening requirement for parking that fronts along Granville Street. They'll be meeting that. And again, we can see the 6-foot wide sidewalk. Here are the elevations. It is 4-sided architecture, so here's 2 sides and the fuel pump, but again, the other sides have the same materials and the same design. Here we can see the brick. This is the bronze metal mechanical screening, red metal roof, red canopies, red awnings, and here is the masonry facade component. In this elevation right here, this is the south elevation, so this would be the elevation most visible from Granville Street. Here's the east elevation. It does show some outdoor dining opportunities. This would be the elevation that would be visible by that traffic signal, that driveway leading back to this site and Shaw Park. Again, here's the canopy, red canopy. See the masonry bases and the bronze here. One thing I'd point out is when we're looking at elevations or we're looking at our materials, we might see signage, but we don't approve signage for this because we don't approve specific users. We approve uses. So again, the signage there is just for artistic purposes. That kind of concludes the basics of the project. Now we'll move into some of the various codes and plans that are apply to a development of this type, and there are a number of land use related policies that apply to this request. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it's located on Granville Street in our downtown. But starting at a higher level here, we have the site is designated as mixed use on the future land use map. So every piece of property in Gahanna has a future land use designation. In this case, it's mixed use. What does mixed use? What are some of the goals? What is it trying to achieve? Well, it wants higher density development and urban development with buildings oriented towards the street and parking to the rear. So in Gahanna, in our land use, when we talk about higher densities and intensities, what do we mean by that? Well, mixed use, the residential densities are 20 to 30 units per acre. Building massing is 60,000 to 200,000 square feet an acre. And the only way to achieve that is by going multiple stories, and that's why the land use plan recommends multi-story buildings and with a mix of uses. Recommended uses are retail, office, and residential as well. That's wide-ranging goals that apply to all properties within the city that are designated mixed use, but because of this site's location in the downtown focus area, is up on your map right here. So it's around the Carpenter Road area, Mill Street, Granville Street, south of Granville. And it terminates right here at this property, would be right here in pink. This is all mixed use. This is the creek. So all the properties on Granville Street, from Mill Street down to the creek, would be included within the downtown focus area. Some of the recommendations of the downtown focus area include medium to high density residential or mixed use, development oriented towards the street, expanding the downtown onto Granville Street. When it says downtown, it's really talking about Mill Street, specifically Creekside. Human scale development with emphasis on the pedestrian, expand the non-motorized network, and a mix of uses to attract businesses and development, support our downtown. There's also design guidelines that apply to all projects and to properties within the downtown focus area. Again, some of the same themes that we already talked about, buildings adjacent to the right-of-way and parking to the rear. And that's, again, to cater to the pedestrians, creating that pedestrian-friendly environment. Again, promote a safe and interesting, comfortable pedestrian environment. Building setback from the sidewalk should be designed with intervening spaces that are attractive to pedestrians. So we'll take a look at what that looks like. But again, shared vehicle access, they have that in spades. There's 4 of those. Sidewalks and multi-use paths along right-of-way. There's an existing sidewalk on Granville Street. and they're providing additional pedestrian connection to the park. So for you eagle-eyed viewers out there, you might recognize this as Creekside. So all those rules that we just talked about, that really is designed to encourage and promote exactly this type of development. So what's key to a downtown? It's massing, its scale, and its uses. Residential uses above all other uses. Doesn't mean that there can't be other uses, of course, but that's what we're striving for is residential, mixed use, preferred and mixed use buildings, so a vertical mix of uses. That's why we have policies that recommend 0-foot setbacks, why we have policies that recommend building footprints of up to 200,000 square feet on an acre. Planning Commission was heavily involved in the zoning code rewrite process that was recently adopted. So I have a slide up here just to, you might be wondering how the new zoning code that will go in effect a week from today, how that might affect this project or similar projects. And the short answer is it has no bearing on this request. This request was submitted months ago, well before the new zoning code was adopted. So it doesn't have any effect on this particular request, but we would like to just share that, a lot of the themes that we just kind of talked about in the land use plan related to uses, related to design, setbacks, building coverage, things of that nature, that's incorporated in the new zoning code. So the property, as of May 1st, the designation will change from community commercial to a mixed-use designation, a Creekside mixed-use district. But again, that's just for our information purposes. It really has no bearing on tonight's conversation. So what does have bearing on tonight's decision-making? Well, I just talked about something that didn't have any really, it might be related with the new zoning code. I know there's been a lot of great feedback, a lot of emails sent with a lot of great points being made. But a lot of those points and items of discussion, talking about traffic congestion, need, what we like and don't like, things of that nature. Those aren't land use policy decisions. That's not how we judge things and evaluate them for their appropriateness. There are 4 criteria to consider. The first is the proposed use, the conditional use of the zoning. Is the proposed use or development in accord with plans for the area? Would the development be in keeping with the existing land use character of the area? Are there undesirable effects? Staff, well, our opinion is that we would recommend denial of the request. Specifically, we don't believe that the conditional use, those 4 conditions have been met. Specifically, the second one with consistency with our land use plan. That is the appropriate plan for the area. Land use plan, as we went through, made specific recommendations about buildings located adjacent to the roadway. In this particular case, we have a sidewalk, then we have basically just a grassed area, then parking, then a canopy with fuel pumps, then more parking, then a building. That building set back approximately 175 feet from the sidewalk. Again, we have a land use plan that's recommending buildings being up adjacent to the street, and if they're not, to have an interesting area for pedestrians. We just looked at an image of Creekside. I'll go back to it here real quick. One thing to note in this image of Creekside is in the area that there is not a building adjacent to the road, there is a large, of course, larger piece of property, but a large, vibrant area here to promote pedestrian activities. So the goal is, in a downtown, besides massing a building, massing of activities, you want people to come and stay. That's why we're, espousing ideas of having attractive, pedestrian-friendly areas. And the land use plan also makes recommendations on a mix of uses, the intensity. This particular request, it's 5,000 square feet on an acre and a quarter, which equates to 4,000 square feet per acre. Again, the land use plan recommends 60 to 200,000 square feet of building per acre. So we're talking about a fraction of the development. We're talking about a development that's set back from the road about 175 feet, and the land use plan makes recommendations where it's being set up adjacent to the road, 0 to 20 feet. But it is important to point out that unlike zoning code, land use plan makes recommendations. So it's here to help guide decisions doesn't necessarily mandate a particular decision. We also have design review criteria and final development plan criteria as well. Design review criteria, these first four are the standard criteria we see in all projects, regardless of where they're located at in the city. And that's, is the project, is it compatible with existing structures? Would it contribute to the improvement of the design of the district? Does it improve or contribute to the economic and community vitality of the district? Does it enhance the physical surroundings? All properties that are zoned commercial are located within DRD 3, which is Design Review District 3. There's some general provisions there where it's talking about enhanced landscaping. Certainly we saw some of that general use of vegetation, and those preferred materials being brick, stone, and so forth, which those are their primary materials. Final development plan. Criteria to evaluate, does the request meet applicable development standards? It does. There are no variance requests. Is it in accord with appropriate plans for the area? Would it have undesirable effects on the area? And is it consistent with the land use character of the area? Staff's opinion, again, is to recommend denial. We don't find that it meets the criteria. One, if the conditional use is denied, then there really isn't a vote and consideration on these items. But even regardless of that, we do find that the request is not consistent with our land use plan. Again, land use plan recommends buildings that are oriented towards the street, 0 to 20 feet. This is 175 feet. It talks about a mix of uses. This is a single use. It's 5,000 square feet of building on an acre and a quarter. And the land use plan is recommending multi-story buildings with 60 to 200,000 square feet per acre. So again, staff would recommend denial. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackford. We'll now go into our public comment section. Before we go in, just want to reiterate some of the ground rules here. If you come up to speak, please go to the podium, speak directly into the microphone so we can hear you and the folks at home can hear you. Please state your name and address and the applicant, the relationship to the project. For those of you in the public, make sure that if you wish to speak that you've filled out a speaker form. And for both the applicant and those in the public, please have your comments addressed directly here to the commission, not to the applicant, not to someone out in the audience, directed to us. So with that, I will turn it over to the applicant for comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, thank you for your time this evening. I'm Joe Miller, 52 East Gay Street, Columbus. With the Voorhees Law Firm, I'm joined by attorney Chris Ingram, attorney Mike Shannon, and we have several folks in attendance tonight to make sure we can address any issues that arise or answer any questions that you may have. I'm joined by the applicant, D.W. Rout of Skilkin Gold Development, Aaron Hensley and Mike Casale of Sheets. Gary Smith is a professional land planner with G2 Planning and Design. Gina Balsamo is our traffic engineer from Carpenter Marty Transportation. And finally, Braden Putnam is our engineer from B3 Companies. I would ask, Mr. Chairman, for indulgence and dispensation from the 10-minute limit set forth in your rules. I think you can understand, obviously, with 3 applications pending, due process and property rights concerns that exist, as well as what appears to be public interest in the project. We don't intend to belabor things this evening, but I wanted to make sure I asked for that at the outset. So if we look at the property itself, I know you're well familiar with the site. 230 Granville Street, the former Coach's location. It is zoned today community commercial. And in fact, it is surrounded by other businesses likewise zoned community commercial or presenting a community commercial use. That drive-through immediately adjacent, Rita's Italian Ice nearby, for instance, Massey's Pizza, Key Bank, Mighty Lion Express Car Wash right across the street. This is a conditionally permitted use in the area today. So if we look more specifically at the site, this is a thoughtful design. It's been thought out well specifically for this site, and here's what I mean by that. It is fully conforming to your code today. Fuel stations such as this, with an accompanying fast casual restaurant, is a conditionally permitted use under the code today, and we meet every standard under today's code. There are no variances needed on this site. And while there was a lot about the land use plan and policies, and we plan to address those, absolutely, the fact of the matter is, to be code compliant on this site, for instance, there is a 60-foot setback required by your code today. And so we designed a site that's not only code compliant, but it actually meets or exceeds every requirement of your code. I appreciate your staff member pointing out parking, 27 required. We have 35 on site. Landscaping, 1,500 square feet required. We have more than 1,600 on site. There is a greater caliper of trees proposed than are actually required. And frankly, you'll hear more tonight how we went further than that we really designed a store and a restaurant that's comparable to residential scale. This would be the smallest Sheetz in central Ohio. We were before you a year and a half ago. We were told we want Sheetz in this community, not just at that location previously proposed. Now we're back tonight having listened and proposing the smallest Sheetz in Ohio. It's actually 20% smaller than most Sheetz sizes as set forth by square footage up there. There are only 10 fueling stations. The average is typically 16, and it does include, staff noted, the greater pedestrian connectivity that's proposed, that walkway that is adaptive to the surroundings, including the park. So this improves pedestrian connectivity, and I can't emphasize enough, there is no drive-through proposed. This is a modest development that meets your code and is designed specifically for your code and for this site. I'm going to allow Mr. Ingram and our team to address the standards for the conditional use permit and address you just briefly before you turn it over to public comment. Thanks again for your time and attention this evening.
Chris Ingram, 52 East Gay Street, Columbus, Ohio, with Voorhees Law Firm. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I remember we were all here a little over a year ago, again on that different site. And, you know, the criteria that Mr. Blackford reviewed, I want to walk you through each of those criteria and show you how this particular development was designed and satisfies each of those criteria. Now, with respect to the conditional use criteria, the zoning code is clear that this commission is required to approve conditional uses that satisfy those four criteria. And so let's start with the first one. This first conditional use criteria has two parts. First are whether the use is a conditional use in that particular zoning district. In this case, yes, there are actually a mix of uses, as we heard Mr. Blackford allude to, for this particular project, because you have eating and drinking places, as well as the sale of general merchandise in the building itself. And eating and drinking places, grocery stores, and general merchandise stores are permitted uses by right in this particular zoning classification for this site. And likewise, gasoline stations are specifically codified to be a conditionally permitted use for this site. Now that's an important point, because from the plain text of the city's zoning code, the fact that the city council has codified gas stations as a conditionally permitted use is an acknowledgement that a gas station use is desirable in the community commercial district, which is what this site is zoned. Now the key then for a conditional use under the zoning code is that the conditional use satisfy the development standards, which leads us to the second prong of this first criteria. And that is whether the applicable development standards established in your zoning code are met. And here we heard that. The design team really sharpened their pencils and worked through each of the development standards in the zoning code that are applicable to this project and developed the site plan that is before you that satisfies each and every development standard. There is no dispute that the applicable development standards are met by the plan that is in front of you. No variances are necessary. Which then leads us to the second prong, or the second criteria, excuse me. The second conditional use criteria is whether the proposed development is in accord with the appropriate plans for the area. And at this time, we would call Gary Smith, a professional land planner from G2 Planning and Design, to walk the commission through this project's compatibility with the plans for the area.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Gary Smith. I'm the owner of G2 Planning and Design, 720 East Broad Street, Columbus, Ohio. I just wanted to start out by saying that I will talk a little bit more about the zoning code in a second, but the uses provided by the application here today are entirely appropriate for this site and its surroundings under the community commercial zoning. As it relates to the land use plan, certainly the land use plan recommends a mixed-use district. And that mixed-use district carries with it a lot of additional standards, buildings closer to the street, similar to Creekside, which is what the staff's already discussed. Unfortunately, this site today is zoned community commercial. That carries a 60-foot front setback and a whole host of other standards that this applicant is required to meet that are not compatible with the mixed-use recommendations of the land use plan. The zoning code does not require that this applicant rezone the property to develop it under the current zoning, and the applicant is allowed to proceed forward with an application under the current zoning. With that being said, though, there are a number of things I think in this plan, in my opinion, that this use will help achieve some of the goals of the land use plan. When you look at the goal of the downtown focus area, it's really to create kind of a live, work, play environment. And I believe that this project helps to support that goal by supporting residents, businesses, employees with essential services and functions as they navigate their daily lives. This location will provide a convenient access for people, whether they're walking by, driving by, going to and from work, to grab a bite to eat, to grab a snack, to refuel their vehicles, or enjoy a dessert after a team victory, playing at the park. And it creates an additional pedestrian connection from the sidewalk to the park, which doesn't exist today. So it does help to enhance that pedestrian connectivity, especially to some of those live, work, play areas. Just from my personal experience, I drive. For work, I drive a lot. I put on average about 30,000 miles a year on a vehicle, which is somewhere north of kind of the average commute and somewhere south of maybe a traveling salesman. But as a result, I fill up a lot. And one thing I've noticed, because I fill up typically probably 2 to 3 times a week at my local Sheetz in New Albany. And one of the things that I've noticed about Sheetz is that the Sheetz is really highly utilized by what I would colloquially categorize as kind of the hardworking, blue-collar, lunch pail crowd. This is a community of people that is well represented in the city of Gahanna. And as far as I've been around and associated with the city of Gahanna or been involved with the city of Gahanna has proudly supported that community. It provides essential services for a lot of those folks. Next slide, if you would, Chris. So the downtown focus area seeks to have a mix of uses, certainly, that serve the needs of all the residents, including pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. But a mix of uses on each individual site is not required by the land use plan. And not every project in the city can be a Creekside, certainly. And just a few things in the land use plan, I think that this project supports. So when you look at the downtown focus area overview, for instance, it says that the downtown has a traditional gridded street pattern and accommodates a mix of retail and office and a variety of housing types. I think this project supports that. It accommodates a number of people that live here, work here, and play here. In the development principles, it calls for a mix of uses that will attract and accommodate both business and new residential development. And I think certainly this will support those goals. And then in the projects, programs, and policy section of the downtown focus area, it goes on to say, attract businesses that support downtown residents. This business will surely support downtown residents in a lot of their daily needs and functions. And it also goes on to say, expedite permit approvals for projects that support residents that do not require a variance. From a land use perspective, the Sheets performs an essential function in the community, providing needed goods and services to local businesses and residents that they rely on every day, such as quality food options for essential workers, whether that be grab and go or a quick dine-in, a convenient location to pick up quick grocery items that are necessary to support everyday life for you and your family, fuel for personal vehicles, for work vehicles, for self-employed contractors, and an opportune location to pick up a quick treat or a drink or a coffee for people who are on the go, walking by, or visiting the adjacent park. But from a review standpoint, next slide if you would, this has to start and end with the zoning code, ultimately, for the conditional use. The land use plan, certainly the future land use plan, is an aspirational document, without question. It's a statement of what the community wants to be, and it's a statement of how the community gets there. But it is not a legal instrument. It's the zoning code that establishes the rules that this property currently has to live by and be governed by, not the land use plan. Not what we wish the code said, not what the code is going to say when it's newly adopted and in effect, but what the code says today is what this property owner has to live by and is what this application has to be judged by. And as Chris alluded to, when you get to the conditional use, right there in the purpose and intent of the conditional use is that, and I'll paraphrase a little bit here, but specifically listed conditional uses are uses that in recognition that are often desirable, but may have more intense effects on neighboring properties. The intent of the procedure for authorizing a conditional use is to set forth the development standards and criteria for locating and developing a conditional use in accordance with the nature of the surrounding area. I think we've done a good job this evening of showing you how this plan meets code, how it fits in with the current surrounding land uses, how it complies with the community commercial zoning district that it currently resides in, and that it can meet many of the many essential functions that are called for in the land use plan. Everyone agrees at this point that the development standards outlined within the zoning code have been followed and no variance is required.
Mr. Chair, the applicant's 10 minutes is up. I know it's within your purview to grant more time. Just want to point that out.
Yeah. So if you could wrap it up, please.
I'll move quickly and
I'll
turn it back
forward
over
you
to
some more
Chris.
time, but let's wrap it up.
Appreciate that, Chair. So I think the proposed use meets the goals established for the types of uses outlined in the future LUP, in that it provides additional pedestrian connectivity to the local park and will provide food and refreshment opportunities to park users, pedestrians, vehicular passengers. The buildings are designed architecturally to fit within the architectural guidelines, utilizing materials that are recommended, including all brick and stone structures, and the design meets the landscape requirements and exceeds the landscape requirements established by code. It provides essential goods and services to downtown residents, employees, and businesses to support a growing and thriving business and residential community. And the zoning code provides the standards which must be upheld by the applicant, and the applicant is seeking no variances from the code to move forward. So,
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, with respect to the third criteria, the third conditional use criteria is whether the proposed development will have undesirable effects on the surrounding area. And I think Mr. Smith just walked the commission members through several of the significant benefits that this development, this project will provide to this vicinity. Now, for example, the residential scale and overall design facilities facilitates both pedestrian and vehicular traffic. And for the first time, there will be sidewalk access to the park located behind the site. There's going to be a 28% increase in green space on this site. There will be outdoor seating area for food service. The development will also serve the pass-by traffic in need of both fuel or food. For the commission members' benefit, we have provided the city with a traffic impact study, and that study concluded that the vast majority of traffic associated with this development is pass-by traffic. In other words, vehicles normally traveling along this street will simply stop by, thus no off-site improvements were warranted. Therefore, for several reasons, the third conditional use criteria is satisfied, which brings us to the fourth and final conditional use criteria: whether the proposed development will be in keeping with the existing land use character and physical development potential of the area. This development was designed specifically for your code to fit within this site and to conform and be compatible with the nearby businesses. And just to show you and compare the existing conditions against what we're proposing tonight, this area currently lacks any businesses with any appreciable vibrant green space. None of the businesses are easily accessible for both pedestrians and vehicles. And looking at the existing site in the lower right-hand corner here, it's a sea of asphalt in a vacant building that abuts this park. There's no sidewalks, very few trees, no real pedestrian connection.
I'm going to ask once again, we've been very judicious with our time, so let's kind of wrap this up, please.
And Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. There are 3 applications pending, and so instead of trying to go through 30 minutes of presentation, we're trying to consolidate this efficiently through one, and we'll be mindful of that. This development addresses many of the shortfalls of the existing conditions. It brings brand new economic investment to this area. I don't need to remind those of you on the commission that, as you drive by all the vacant storefronts that are adjacent to this site, across the street from this site, this Sheets will bring significant investment to the area and bring a new anchor and investment to attract and draw new economic development to the site.
Okay. You're your time, so thank you. You will have an opportunity to make a rebuttal after public comment, so thank you.
I'll just note for the record, we do object to being prohibited from presenting additional evidence and information concerning our design review application and the final development plan application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now open it up to public comment. Again, if you wish to come and speak, please make sure that you have a speaker slip. We have a 3-minute time limit established in our rules. Mr. Hickson will be our timekeeper. So I'll read the first one, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. Alveda Bates. Again, please come to the podium and state your name and address.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alvita Bates. I live at 100 Jan Drive. I have been a resident in Gahanna for 50 years. I appreciate anyone's interest in making our city a better city. The plans that I have been looking at here are wonderful. They've been laid out great, but they are not for Gahanna. They are not for that particular site. We have a vision here, and I think all of you know that we are in the midst of a vision for Gahanna to be the downtown that we have known it to be. Oh, okay, very good. And we want a lot of the embellishments that these gentlemen have presented to us, and we're working on it. We're working on it as a community. We want the community to be vibrant. We are 58,000. We're the biggest city in the suburbs. I have seen Sheetz. Sheetz didn't make it in New Albany. They're on the outside of New Albany. Sheetz does not need to be in the middle of Granville Street, which is really residential slash business. And I want to add, when we do and make your decision on what we do, it lasted a long time. Strawberry Plaza has been a nightmare straight across from where they would be. The post office is crazy. The other thing that we said, and the gentleman said, well, we are going to have, fuel stations. When the fuel station went in at the corner of Hamilton across from the high school, they promised us they would have all this great landscaping. They would maintain the place. Has anybody driven by Hamilton and Granville lately? No. They have not maintained. They didn't hold up to their promise. The Strawberry Plaza didn't hold up to their promise. They have created some of the empty buildings, some of the traffic problems that we have had because they did not hold up. I'm sorry. I can understand why they would want to be there. I would welcome any other kind of business. I don't think it fits anything in like downtown Gahanna. So I would hope you would think about Gahanna, who we really are here, how we really want to look. And I really don't think, even though they have a great design, they've got in all their, people that are, they brought in the big guns tonight. So I'm hoping you think about us, and I'm hoping you're going to be working for Gahanna. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker slip, Tom Lizak. Liskay. Apologize.
Tom Liskay, 457 Tresham Road here in Gahanna. Been here about 37 years, and I will be brief. I want to address the undesirability criteria. If this facility wasn't selling gasoline and diesel, I would probably say, hey, come in, you're welcome, make the restaurant twice as big, put the parking in the back. I like their food, but let's look at the risk and consider that as undesirability. We've got two waterways, Rocky Fork Creek and the Sycamore Run within eyesight. In the back, we have a flood zone, the park area, and I'm not an engineer, but looking at the drawings, it appears that the 100-year flood zone occupies about 40% of the property. And when you're bringing in diesel trucks with fuel, I mean, it's rare, but every once in a while, there is a problem, there is a disaster, and it would not be good for those creeks or that flood zone in the back. My other concern would be air pollution. I note the fuel pumps are, the roof is high enough, I believe, for semis looking for low sulfur fuel. And we got a school there on Carpenter, plus all the people walking on the sidewalk, whatever. And I think we would just want to avoid this area for any type of gasoline station. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Braden Putnam. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, next we have Tom Wester.
Thanks for hearing me. Okay. The land use plan.
Have your name and address, please.
Tom Webster, 888 Ludwig Drive, 43230.
Thank you.
The land use plan is a leadership guide. I commend Mr. Blackford in preparing it and his analysis. I applaud former Mayor McGregor and Councilman Renner for speaking out against the proposed Sheets location. For my tenure on this commission, I advocated with others for the gentrification of Granville Street. Earlier today, someone said to me, Granville Street should be our front room, okay? About 30 years ago, Granville Street was widened. Somewhere in the archives, you'll find a picture of that church and the massive oak tree they cut down to put 5 lanes of road, street in it. I don't think Gahanna ever recovered from that. Moving forward on this, as I said, the land use plan is a leadership guide. In there, and it's been recently revised, but previous city leadership had conditional use as part of that. It's also in this land use guide, and that was sound advice. Conditional use approved here is essentially a 30-year commitment. Sitting where you sit right now, I can recall 1 or 2 conditional uses that if I had to do it again, I'd vote no, okay? Again, as I commented, I applaud previous Mayor McGregor, Stephen Renner, and I applaud Mayor Jadwin. As she stated, it lies in your lap, the decision of what we want to do. You look at our land use plan, and it describes what we want as citizens, as the owners of this city, for Grandview Street. It needs an update. Go around Columbus, Ohio, the growth, and you will see Grove City, Hilliard, Westerville, how many others? Okay? That's all I've got. Thank you. Good luck with your decision.
Next, we have Ryan March.
Ryan March, 278 Rivers End Road, just across the street in Gramercy Park. I wish to convey to the Commission my thoughts on Sheets' application for a location on Granville Street. I strongly oppose this and ask that you deny their applications. Their application resulted in staff's recommendation against the gas station as it does not comply with the conditional use for this community commercial area. The land use plan makes recommendations for a reason, and we should follow it. The new zoning code has been built under feedback from the Gahanna community about what kind of town that we want to live in. This zoning code would not allow for Sheetz to be placed on Granville Street. I'm in favor of enacting the new zoning code quickly, as I believe it would more accurately represent what I and Gahanna residents wish for this area. In fact, you just heard them say Gahanna residents want that new zoning code, which would prohibit them from building. Economically, this type of development represents a net loss for this area of Gahanna. Higher density developments and businesses are shown to deliver more revenue for the city as well as for other businesses in the area. As you look around, you'll find in that area there are no other 24-hour businesses. And in fact, I bet I could go around this room twice asking people what they would want next to a school, a library, a park, a creek, and nobody would say a gas station. I am a local resident who walks up and down Granville Street every day, and I'm concerned for my own safety and that of others. Many families, groups, and couples travel the area on foot, on bike, or in a vehicle. A gas station would induce more vehicle traffic to Granville Street, as well as its surrounding roads and intersections. The application includes a line about providing connection between Creekside, which is misspelled, by the way, and Hamilton Road. I don't know why they think anyone would follow this connection. There are currently no people in Gahanna that are wanting to walk from Creekside to Hamilton, but won't because there isn't a Sheetz. Adding more cars, trucks, and delivery tankers to the driveway, adding a traffic light and crosswalk attached to this property will only become a hindrance to existing and future foot traffic. They say they'll put in a sidewalk, which sounds great. It goes across two driveways, again, carrying these cars and trucks all the time. I don't know how this could be even ADA compliant. They tell you there's outdoor dining. It's by the dumpster. Nobody would be interested in that. They tell you they're adding green space, which they'll add a little bit of grass and 15, 20 trees that won't provide any shade. I wish to see new businesses that follow the new zoning code and land use plan recommendations. It's not just Sheetz in particular that is inappropriate here, it's all gas stations in this location. Please deny Sheetz applications. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Maura O'Donnell.
Maura O'Donnell, 278 Rivers End Road, Gahanna. The proposed Sheetz doesn't meet land use plans in the mixed use code that will be in effect starting May 1. The land use plan and the new code reflect the desires of Gahanna, of the residents of Gahanna. In other words, Sheetz is not desired here. I, like many others, purchased my house in 2022. I chose Gahanna and my neighborhood specifically for its proximity to walking paths, parks, the library, Creekside, and for the community. My husband and I walk on Granville almost every day, either during our daily walk to go to the library, to visit other businesses along this street. And during my walks, I often see students, teenagers, and families walking to visit these locations as well as the local schools. Sheetz in this location makes me fear for our safety due to the increased vehicle traffic on an already busy street. This isn't just traffic along the street. I mean vehicles at the site, at that crosswalk, at the area to get to Shoal Park. Sheetz would require tanker trucks carrying fuel to drive on a street that otherwise doesn't see many semi-trucks. I don't want to fight for space against these tankers, and I don't want to see teens and families have to fight them either. Putting a gas station here will deter the area's ability to create the residents' vision for a safe, walkable community. This land is much more suited for businesses that are set to a human scale and that are preferably locally owned, meaning that real people are able to easily walk up and enjoy the facility that is focused on serving them, not their cars. Sheetz states that they will be a resource for people on the go. This will turn the area into a thoroughfare, with people stopping only for minutes to get gas. I, and I'm sure others, want to see Gahanna continue to become a destination. Other businesses would do better and be better able to encourage this with human scale buildings. Destinations like these mean that people stick around longer and are more likely to spend money at not only this site, but the surrounding areas as well, meaning more economic stimulation for more of Gahanna without the risk of safety concerns. In addition, Strong Towns, a nonprofit advocacy organization, shows mixed-use development generates more tax income per acre compared to single-use suburban buildings. I was at the Gahanna litter cleanup last Saturday. I picked up too many cigarette butts to count. I believe sheets at this location will increase the litter of cigarettes, plastic drink bottles, food containers, and more caused by people on the go who aren't from Gahanna and don't care about the community. The area has many flood zones around it, which will cause that litter to be put into our waterways and into Shoal Park. I'm against this proposed sheet site as is inappropriate for the area due to the safety land use plans and my other stated undesirable effects. I know there is something better for us out there. I implore the commission to deny the sheet's application and allow businesses better suited for the location to find their home here and to grow in Gahanna. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Robert Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Robert Johnson. I live at 144 Laura Drive, Gahanna, Ohio. I'm concerned about Sheetz coming to our area in our downtown area. I don't understand. Sheetz right now is about, what, 3 to 4 miles from us, located on Stelzer and Johnstown Road. Why do you need another one so close to our community? I see this impacting our local merchants because of the volume that they sell and their prices will be reduced. I'm concerned about, I don't know if you've seen Sheetz, but they usually have a tanker there every couple of days. Can you imagine coming in that driveway with the tanker, cars, kids going over to the park? It's just going to be a safety nightmare. I think it's going to impact downtown traffic. There's so many things that will happen to our community. I've been a resident in Gahanna for over 20 years, and like many others have said, I like walking down Granville Street. I like going into a shop, but the bottom line, I want to be safe. I don't want to have to be looking around and see if there's a tanker, if people are going to be rushing into the service station. My other concern is, and you can test it if you like, go to Sheetz at the corner of Stelzer and Johnstown. Every trash can is filled. Trash is running over because they suffer from a lack of staffing. And we will be saddled with that situation because trash cans will be full, wind will be blowing, and then that whole beautiful site that they're putting all these trees and all the landscaping will be trashed. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was the last speaker form I had. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to speak? If you could, if you'd like to speak, please do fill out a form.
How are you?
Again, could you
Fill it out first?
please?
Absolutely. I apologize.
You can bring it up here. Robert Burnett?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Robert Barnett. I live at 241 Shaw Avenue here in Gahanna. Okay, first of all, so eloquently portrayed by this gentleman over here, it mentioned the word sidewalks 5 times. These gentlemen over here mentioned the fact green space. They also mentioned the fact sidewalks. All right, we have a sidewalk there now that the kids have to walk back and forth to school, back and forth to the library. Okay, people walk in this neighborhood back and forth. All right, a Sheetz in that location that has one entryway in and out onto Granville will create a traffic nightmare. I also heard people speak here for the last hour or so about Sheets in that location. Not once did I hear anything about an environmental survey, an environmental impact survey, when you have a floodplain right behind the building that they propose, and the fact that it will sit between two waterways. Okay, these are things that you guys need to think about, okay? The future of this community rests with you. And how many of you really want to go, oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in attendance? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, we received 59
We're up
emails?
to 60, I believe.
60. Okay, so I just want to make it on the record, we received 60 email correspondence. I think it's safe to say about 98% of those were con, about 2% pro. Is that about right?
I believe 3 or 4 were in favor.
Okay. Again, just want to state that for the record. So seeing no other public comments, would the applicant like to do a rebuttal? And again, you'll have 10 minutes for a rebuttal.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Sheets is a partner in the communities that they're in. We value the feedback received here tonight. We listened intently. But I can also tell you that you took an oath to uphold the laws of this city. And as you know, and have heard, and it's undisputed, this site is code compliant. While there's been a lot of talk about the policies of the land use plan, the fact of the matter is you can't build up to the street and be code compliant. You'd have to seek a variance. There's a conflict between the code and the land use plan in several respects, and the code controls. It is the law of this city. Issues mentioned included traffic. Not only are you not permitted to consider that under Ohio law, but our traffic impact study shows that there is no issue. There is no issue. There are no off-site improvements warranted because any increase in traffic is negligible. There were complaints and issues raised tonight about the new zoning code, which you know has no application to this proposal. I want to be respectful of the citizens who took time out of their day to be here this evening, but Sheets is not desired here, is not a basis for denial. It's just not. Your code controls. We were told a year and a half ago, go find another location. We want you in Gahanna, but go find another location. We did so. We made this site work with the smallest sheets in central Ohio by increasing and improving landscaping and pedestrian connectivity, by not trying to put a drive-through on this site. And you've been told tonight how, in fact, this site does meet many of the goals, policies, and aspirations actually set forth in your land use plan. If we could put our presentation materials up again for a moment. You're capably represented this evening by Mr. Roth. But even Mr. Roth would agree with me on some basics of Ohio zoning law. The laws of zoning in municipalities such as this need to be construed in favor of the property owner. They need to actually be strictly construed against restrictions upon the free use of property. And all doubt is to be resolved in favor of the landowner. Any ambiguity must be construed against the city. We've told you tonight how we meet the code, but we also meet many of those goals, aspirations, and policies within your land use plan. All doubt needs to be resolved in favor of the landowner. We think this is a positive development. We think we've worked hard to make this site better. But the fact of the matter is we are talking about private property rights here. An applicant has the right to be free from arbitrary zoning decisions. Otherwise, it violates that applicant's due process rights. An applicant has the right to be treated similarly to other applicants under community commercial zoning standards and receive equal treatment in zoning matters. That's true whether or not you desire a Sheetz here, whether you like Sheetz or not, whether you like this location or not. The evidence in favor of the factors for the conditional use permit is substantial. And I don't like to talk about this, but it needs to be stated that the city needlessly opens itself up to liability for damages, for attorney's fees, for disregarding its code in favor of a policy that's merely a guide or the aspirations of nearby residents. We need to follow the law. Now, I'd rather close by telling you what a positive partner Sheetz is in the community, how they'll do everything they can to make this site what the residents want, to achieve those goals in the land use plan. That's the better way to end tonight. And I ask that you vote in favor of this in accordance with your code, Ohio zoning law, and the rights of property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we will now close public comment, and we will open up questions to the commission, starting with Mr. Shapaka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have need a clarification from Blackford or from Joe Miller. I'm going to call him Joe. The thing that popped up was the 1.25 acre lot split. How did that come about, or what's the advantages of that? Yeah.
That'd be better addressed by the applicant.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. We understand this is a larger site with existing businesses on it. What would happen is, with your approval tonight, we'd work through all of the permitting, including engineering, which addresses many of the concerns raised tonight related to the nearby waterways. And then eventually, the lot would be split. The 1.25 would be split off. We do that at the conclusion of approvals and entitlement of the property.
So split off, leased, or owned by Sheetz?
The Sheetz has a development agreement with Skilk & Gold. I'm not familiar as to whether this is a build-to-suit or a leased site. Leased? It would be a leased site.
Still leased?
Correct. Typically
So
on a 20-year
the reason I would ask that is,
renewal. Sorry, I didn't mean
so
to speak over
the reason I asked that is, it's a nice big site, a big project can go on there, and depending if it's, you own it, you're dividing it, and it reduces the opportunities to possibly in the future enhance it, but since you're leasing it, that kind of keeps it in favor.
Sheetz is leasing it. It would be owned by Skilk & Gold here locally.
Good. Okay, while you're standing there, can you give me an explanation on, I don't use Sheetz. I have a son who does use Sheetz, and he looks at me funny when he knows I'm in his position. The 35 parking spaces, why are you requesting more than what's required? Because typically,
sorry.
Yeah, typically we don't get more than what's required.
We're providing more than is required to give the best functionality to the layout. The fact of the matter is, some people joke about it, but some people actually take it seriously. Sheetz is a fast casual restaurant that happens to sell gas. And so people may come and stay. They may eat in. They do every day at other locations.
So to elaborate on that, your clientele that you're expecting, is it high school kids? I mean, is it?
There's a Sheetz near my home in Central Ohio. It runs the gamut. It can be those work trucks early morning for their breakfast sandwich and a cup of coffee. It could be high school kids at lunch, and it could be young families grabbing something quick to eat before soccer practice in the park.
The other question I had was the tanker delivery. We hear about congestion with the tankers. Do you have a very specific time frame for this specific property of when the tanker would arrive or projected to arrive?
Well, I like to think that I'm okay as a lawyer. I'm not an operations manager for Sheetz, so let me introduce Aaron Hensley.
Aaron Hensley, 630 Morrison, Suite 150, Gahanna. Could you repeat that question again? Sorry.
So the tanker, the actual delivery of the tanker at this site for the gas, to refill the tanks?
Yes.
So your trucks are going to deliver the fuel for the underground tanks?
Correct.
Is that at night? Is that during the business hours? When is that?
Well, we actually own those tanker trucks, so it's kind of when we, say it is. but it depends on, how empty the tanks are. But with us owning them, we don't want them on the lot during busy hours.
So you do try to do that at night or
So
in
we
the
would
evenings?
rather do that when we are not busy.
But you don't have a specific time frame that you have blocked out now for this property?
We do not, no.
You're good.
I wanted to follow up too on your earlier question. It is a 15-year lease with the current property owner, and we have 5-year extensions.
Very good, thank you.
Mhm.
This is a Shaw Park, is a zone CC. Does the city of Gahanna have any interest in developing that or declaring that something else that?
I can tell you that our department's looked into, for other reasons, Shoal Park, and there's deed restrictions on that go for a severe length of time. I forget when they subside, but I want to say it's like 20 or 30 more years. So there's nothing imminent because there's deed restrictions on that property.
Just deed restrictions. Thank you, Mr. Blackford. One final question on the, can you address the concern with the fuel in the floodplain?
Ask Braden, our engineer, to come forward, but I can tell you, first of all, I apologize for a misstatement a moment ago as to who they're leasing the site from. That was my mistake. But, I can tell you, obviously, that Sheetz owns the trucks. They control when they're filled. The underground tanks are not in any flood zone. The filling will not take place in any flood zone, but I'll let Braden speak more to that.
Hi, Braden Putnam, V3 Companies, design engineer on this project, 550 Polaris Parkway, Westerville. Want to alleviate some of the public concern in regards to the floodplain. Portions of the site do reside in the floodplain. This is the rear portion that contains the building. As was stated, the tanker area where it will fill in is not within the floodplain. The base flood elevation for the floodplain, the building will be designed to be at least 1 foot above it per FEMA regulations, and this site will be designed to adhere to the FEMA regulations. We will submit a Lomar F application post-construction to verify that, and any floodplain permits that would be needed are worked out during engineering review and during that phase. Sheetz also goes above and beyond to provide contingencies for these concerns. The site will utilize underground detention. This site is a redevelopment, so under the OHC permit, EPA general permit, we're required to detain 20% more extra volume. Those underground detention systems do accommodate that. And they also have isolator rows that allow pollutants to be filtered and make sure they don't get released into the nearby streams that were of concern. Bioskirts are also on some of these structures that further filter out the pollutants. And finally, right at the fuel canopy is a trench drain that will also lead to oil water separator that will also filter out those pollutants. So there's multiple steps that will prevent these pollutants of concern to even get close to the waterways.
Thank you, Ray. No more questions, Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Spacker.
I would just want to add to that last answer. I respect your citizens' concerns this evening. We want to address them fully, as I hope Mr. Emmett did. But denial on any basis such as that, the proximity of waterways, is not founded in fact and entirely speculative.
Ms. Pollier?
Yes. I have several questions, several different topics. First question, just curious, how many 5-year extensions are in the lease? Do you know?
I believe there are 7, which would, yes, Mr. Hensley.
Are there any options to purchase or first rights of refusal or anything like that contained in the lease?
First rights of refusal.
Can you explain what those are?
We just, if the owner chooses to sell the property, we have, I think, 10 or 15 business days to make the first offer on it.
Is that during the original lease term or during one of the extension periods, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
All terms.
Okay. I just had some questions about the hours of this location. It's my understanding that this store is open 24 hours. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In similar suburbs such as Gahanna, where you've opened these locations, can you talk to us a little bit about, I guess, just the volume of people that come at different hours of the day? Is there, during the overnight hours, I don't know if you have, if you've ever done studies to show, how many people.
I'm not aware of studies, but I can tell you, morning, noon, and PM are our busiest volumes.
Do you operate at full capacity during the overnight hours?
No, we do not. And we have 2 people on staff. That's mostly, that time is used for cleaning and stocking. I'm not sure on average, what time that volume dies down, but I would think the biggest volume is probably like 5 to 7 PM.
Just have another question too. You talked a lot about conditional use, which we know is what this is as per the current zoning code. You talked about how it was, because it was a conditional use, it was desirable. Can you elaborate on kind of what you mean by that?
Yeah, the idea that if it was designated as a conditionally permitted use, we often call it conditional use, it's actually conditionally permitted, that it's clearly not excluded, it is not a prohibited use, it is desirable for the area if and when the factors are met.
So because it's listed as a conditional use, it's automatically desirable, is that?
Well, it is permitted, yes, it's conditionally permitted.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
I apologize,
No, I'm just trying
the
to.
actual use of the word desirable, permitted uses can be built as of right, and you can presume are desirable. A conditionally permitted use is dependent upon the factors, and when met, that use is equally desirable. It is a permitted use at that point.
Okay, I was just trying to understand your presumption there. I have another question too for the planning department. I wrote it down while we were talking. Has the planning department ever made any recommendations for approvals that are inconsistent with the land use plan in recent years? And if so, what were they?
Staff, chances are I would have worked on any of those projects since the land use plan was adopted in, I believe it was fall of 2019, and I don't recall that being the case.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Nix?
No questions.
Mr. Greenberg?
Couple questions. We talked about semis, obviously, for the fuel trucks coming in. Are any other semis going to be allowed in for fueling?
Are you talking like 18-wheelers to come in to get gas at our store?
Yeah, yeah.
No,
So they won't fit on the site,
no.
and there'll be signs saying no semis?
We could put a sign up that says that, sure. But it's not what we would call a truck diesel location. We have 4 of those around the Columbus market that are, right off the major highways that are 10, 12 acres and set up for that. This is not set up for 18-wheelers.
It's a good question. It's set up for a community commercial use rather than an intensive highway use.
Okay.
And I'll throw one more thing out there. Like I said, we can sign it for that. We actually have to sign one of our sites up at Polaris that, no 18-wheelers are allowed on our lot. So we're open to doing that.
So how are you going to have directional signs around the city and other areas on Hamilton Road, getting off the expressway at 270, directing people on how to get to your site?
No, we would not.
Okay.
This is not a highway location.
Okay. I did have a flood question. Mr. Shapaka kind of stole my thunder there. There is flooding potential in the back of the property. I heard your engineer state that.
Portions of it are within the floodplain.
Right. So
It's the 100-year floodplain.
Are there plans?
100-year floodplain, just so we're clear.
100-year
Yes.
storm. Are there any, you said most of the water will run into underground storage, correct? Will there be other areas where the water's going to run off on its own?
All the site of that 1.25 acres will be designed to be detained within that underground detention system. Nothing will flow off site and flood the surrounding parcels. That's the engineering intent there, and we'll make sure it's engineered that way.
And since you're the engineer, I'm going to ask this question. The land use plan clearly states that they want buildings to be in the front, frontage towards the street. Was there any thought given in your design to adhere to the land use plan and move the building from the back to the front and the pumps to the back?
So there's actually two engineering points to that. One is in regards to the floodplain. We don't want to put the underground storage tanks in the floodplain.
Right.
So they're located in the front. That's part of the reason why the building is located in the back. Another reason is an operational standpoint for those delivery trucks, making them go all the way to the back and then coming forward to deliver just didn't work from an operational standpoint.
I would also just add 2 points. This is where your code is currently in conflict with the land use plan because of that 60-foot setback requirement. For people, who make use of the park, I think there's actually this is an ideal setup for someone to grab a Gatorade real quick between games, et cetera, with the store in the back. And in fact, I understand your land use plan talks about the streetscape. I invite you to think of this site as having 2 frontages. The park is also its front yard, and I think this presents well through pedestrian connectivity, interacting with the public through the convenience store and the convenience or the fast casual restaurant closest to where the pedestrians are. So that's another thought.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, that's any questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Siriano.
I don't have questions right now.
Mr. Tamarkin?
I have very few. Most were asked. You stated no variance request. That will include no variance needed for signage?
We're not discussing signage at this point, but most of our signage around Central Ohio is code compliant, so I don't anticipate that.
Okay, and the dumpster will be not require variance at some point either? Okay. Actually, my other questions were all answered, so I'm good.
Okay, I just had a few questions. Going back to the FEMA floodplain, the engineer had referenced, or I think the statement was that you'd be in compliance with FEMA standards for building. What about City of Gahanna standards?
Yeah.
City of Gahanna.
Yeah, the site will be designed to adhere to FEMA standards as well as the City of Gahanna's floodplain standards. During engineering review, we'll go through that process and make sure everything is up to code there.
Okay. And I think I know the answer to this question, but you do realize what you're doing in there. I mean, you can, put as much freeboard as you want, but Mother Nature's going to do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to do what it's going to do, and you're okay with that.
Well, the site will be over-designed to make sure it accommodates for the 100-year floodplain elevation, which is the maximum elevation.
Okay, and I guess the reason for the question is that, I mean, we've seen some pretty bad storms, and again, I just don't want you to walk into something that, that you're not, unprepared for. And I've done floodplain management for a lot of years. I've seen it. So that's that question. Was there any additional consideration to increasing the size of the sidewalk? I know that we'd mentioned 6 foot, which I think is ADA standards. Any consideration to making that potentially wider?
It could be, yes. I know another question that was brought up by the public earlier was ADA compliance and making sure that those cross-access are safe and applicable. That will be designed per ADA standards. No questions.
And we're open to that if that's of interest to this commission to enhance the connectivity even further if a wider path is what's desirable. We're open to that.
Okay. And then you'd made reference to a traffic impact study. Did I miss something? Was that not included in the application packet?
The traffic impact study has been performed and submitted, correct, Debbie? And I'm happy to bring Gina, our traffic engineer.
No, That's okay. It's just I didn't see it in the application. I just didn't want to make sure I didn't miss something. What?
It was resubmitted to staff.
If I may, Mr. Chair, traffic studies are separate from Planning Commission. So they're submitting directly to our engineering department. That gets reviewed by them. That's separate from what we're talking about tonight. So that probably is not part of the package because of that.
Okay. Again,
But
I just want to make sure it
sometimes
wasn't
it is,
missing
so I know it's
anything.
kind of confusing, yes, sir.
Okay. And then finally, this, just again I know you've kind of touched on this, but just again, what would your response be to the really the crux of the denial from staff? You know, they kind of reached out that, you know, or stated that their basis for their rejection for this. How, again, what's your response to that?
Well, I would say it's essentially boils down to factor two, because one is undisputed. 3 and 4, there are desirable benefits presented to the area as a result of this. The idea that we do, in fact, not only conform to code, we exceed code's requirements, and Mr. Smith has outlined for you many of the aspirations, goals, and policies in the land use plan that we do satisfy, that we do meet. So there is a respectful disagreement, but a clear disagreement between staff and the applicant and owner as it relates to factor number 2. And I believe, as I said earlier, the evidence weighs heavily in favor of us on that, and any doubt needs to be resolved in favor of the application.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before we close, questions from the commission. I'll go one more time. Any other questions from the commission?
No questions.
Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve CU-0002-2024?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional use number CU-0002-2024.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Špaka. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Holly?
Second by Ms. Polly. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I know you read all 3 of the applications in at once, and for my comments and discussion on this is I'm going to go over all of them to save a little bit of time instead of waiting one at a time. I will be in favor of the final development plan application. I think that the professionalism that was taken by the assembled staff was excellent. Your product is good, your product branding, all the considerations you made are on par with what Gahanna would want. I would also say that I would be in favor of the design review application because the product that you have in the landscaping, you went above and beyond, you meet all our requirements. For the consideration for the conditional use, I will not be in favor of because my understanding is that the conditional use is for consideration of the board based upon a specific location. And it's a consideration, it's a conditional use consideration. And that's put in there not as a must be, but it's kind of fit in there maybe as not as a filler, but as you can consider these uses. And I don't think that at this time, I'm not in favor of it does not fit the current zoning classification straight. The conditional use is not accepted, and it's inappropriate for the area. The conditional use request, excuse me, is not a unique item. We have gas stations down the street all over the place. For as much as I would like to see a Sheetz in Gahanna, this is not the place. And to go back to the final development plan, the setback, I think that the pumps, the canopy for the pumps kind of gives us that edge that we would be looking for that matches the other buildings. So that, again, is complementary. Would be in favor of that, but not to conditional use. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Polly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to start by saying that I take the oath that I made as a planning commissioner incredibly seriously, and I am mindful that what we decide here today in this body can and will affect the city and residents of Gahanna for a long time.
However, I'm also an attorney, and when I decide anything, I follow the letter of the law, not necessarily the spirit of the law. And in this situation, the letter of the law is Gahanna zoning code statute, which has been pointed out. What I feel is important to point out at this time is that the current zoning code has a gas station as a conditional use, specifically a conditional use, not a conditional permitted use, but a conditional use. And a conditional use doesn't necessarily equal desirability. If you actually look at the words of our zoning code, it says specifically in chapter 1169.01, the nature of conditional uses. Specifically listed conditional uses are provided within the zoning district regulations in recognition that such uses, although often desirable, will more intensely affect the surrounding area in which they are located than the permitted uses of such zoning districts. So I will be voting no on all three of these applications before us today for that specific reason. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by complimenting the applicant. This is a great product. It's better than what was presented a year and a half ago. I was in support of that application. And regardless of what happens tonight, I'll echo what I said then, what I said at our workshop, and that is I hope that Sheetz finds a home in Gahanna. No, I'm not an attorney, but I did pick up on what Ms. Paulier just read about how our code does not say conditionally permitted use. And I would argue, and I'm not equipped because I'm not an attorney, I'm not equipped to debate the legalese as eloquently as an attorney would be. So my comments are why I am making my decision and why I'm voting the way that I am. And I would argue, or I'd start by saying that complying with our code is more than having an absence of variances. Our code is more than just setbacks and more than parking. It is to be taken as a whole. So again, the absence of variances, I would suggest, does not make a development comply with code. To further elaborate on that, our zoning code in that same section that Ms. Paulier referenced, 1169, and the applicant brought up that the approval, the Planning Commission shall approve if 4 conditions are met. In that same section, 1169.04C, this section of the code also provides when a Planning Commission shall disapprove an application. And it says the Planning Commission shall only disapprove an application for a conditional use for any one of the 4 criteria. So if any one of the 4 criteria are not met, it is appropriate to deny the conditional use application. In my opinion, the proposed development is not in accord with the appropriate plans of the area, which is condition 2. And in my opinion, the proposed development is not in keeping with the existing land use character and physical development potential of this area. So for those reasons, my vote will be no. Should we proceed to a design review or final development plan, I would be in support of both of those because it is a good product. And again, I'm impressed with the work that was done to make this comply with the other portions of our code. A couple of additional comments. I'd like to say, thanks to the public that came out and spoke. This was a very civil discussion. That's not always the case. That wasn't the case the last time that we were considering a sheet. So thank you for those that showed up and then spoke. I hope, and this will be my final comment, I hope that should a mixed-use, high-density development come into this area, that we will see your support for that. So stay tuned. And Mr. Chair, those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's hard for me now because Mr. Chapaka, Ms. Bollier, and Mr. Hicks expressed my sentiment pretty well all the way down the line. And I'd like to say I'm really hoping that Sheets will be a business in Gahanna in an appropriate location. I would echo that, in my opinion, the proposed development is supposed to be in accord with the appropriate plans for the area, and our land use plan does not include that. I agree with the city's recommendations, and I will be voting no as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano?
Yeah, thank you. I would echo Mr. Greenberg's comments. From the other commissioners have made some very good points that I also agree with. Namely, and I do want to remind everybody tonight, because I know this came up in some of the correspondence, but this commission, an approved application tonight doesn't mean that regulations regarding permitting or the environmental studies or building code are negated. Those all have to be met for a building permit to be issued. So that gets vetted through the city well beyond this commission. So I just wanted to point that out because I think there's some misunderstanding of what our purview is. And my comments are really consistent with what I said on December 6th, I think was our workshop, where I was not in favor of this use on this site. Really focused on just evaluating based on what we have in place today. I think the applicant, illustrated that, we can't cite future zoning code because it's not in place. The zoning code that we have in place today is what we have. And I'll also say, Mr. Hicks highlighted this, but the absence of variances doesn't necessarily imply approval. Final development plan and design review are part of our zoning code. So this commission is adhering to that code simply by having this process and working with that. And I think that I do have some issue with the idea that that Sheets is being characterized as a fast casual restaurant. I hold true to what I said in the workshop, that if that were the case, the pumps would not be in the front. That wouldn't be the first thing that you see. And I think that the idea that Ms. Pollier highlighted, that this conditional use was implied that it was desirable, I think is a really important one, because it really speaks to conditional use being a more intense use, and that's why we scrutinize it more. I think that agree with the shall approve. I don't think Mr. Hicks highlighted that only one condition need not be met for this to be disapproved, and I don't believe all those conditions are met. I'll focus mostly on 2 and 4. I don't believe it's in accordance with the plans for the area, and in terms of land use character, I don't believe it is. I think if you look at the adjacencies in this vicinity, it's not in character. There are no 24/7 establishments that exhibit the same urban or spatial character of a filling station. There's nothing really similar in operating hours, access or volume, site use lighting, or material. And I don't think that's in character. If we look at the mixed use development designation, I know that's part of our land use plan and part of a guiding document. But even if we look at the presentation from the applicant and some of the points they were making around, this district is not oriented towards the street. The first thing you get to off of the street are a row of parked cars and a canopy for gas pumps. What we talk about when we think about human-scaled environments with a focus on a pedestrian is building access and what that looks like and how that engages the street. I think this does the opposite. It disengages the pedestrian from the street by separating it, pushing it to the back of the site. I think that when we look at the expanding our non-motorized network, I mean, this really does have a focus on the car, again, with the fueling station in the front. 2 to 4 stories are recommended. This is, the massing's not in line, it's single story. I don't believe that this, from the presentation specifically, I don't believe this to have vibrant green spaces. When I think of vibrant green spaces, I think of spaces that you can play in and be entertained in. These are really, strips of lawn. I don't think it's easily accessible from a pedestrian from a pedestrian standpoint. Again, speaking about separation with vehicles. And I generally just don't think it's consistent with the city's vision for what we've articulated for this area and for the land use of this area or its development potential as illustrated in point 4. So I won't be in favor of the conditional use. Where we go forward with the planning and the design review, I would be in favor of the final development plan given some of the accommodations, but I would not be in favor of the design review for reasons that I was highlighting previously. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Triano. Mr. Tamarkin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Fellow commissioners said it all, so I'm good.
Yes, and I'm also not going to be voting in support of this. Again, I can't really add any more than what's already been stated by my commission members up here. I also am in very strong agreement with what staff pointed out in their presentation for their recommending denial of this. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Hence the reason for my question there at the end. I also want to again state that I think Ms. Pollier did a really concise job and just I think just reconfirms why my no votes where I'm going to stand on this. So with that, clerk, please call the roll.
Chappaka.
No.
Pollier. No. Suriano.
No.
Tamarkin.
No.
Greenberg.
No.
Hicks.
No.
Mako.
No. Motion fails. So the next application is our design review. And this is going to be case DR-0006-2024. And believe that since I'll hand this over to the applicant, the conditional use is not going forward. So again, I believe this is going to be a moot point. Would I be correct in that understanding?
Does the applicant want a vote on the design review and FDP?
Staff previously pointed out to the commission that if you don't approve the conditional use, you won't be voting on the other two. And so I understand that to be the position of the city.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So with that, we will skip over the next 2 agenda items, the design review and the final development plan. And we'll go on to our next agenda item, which is unfinished business, which I believe we have none. New business, also none. Official reports, Assistant City Attorney.
Nothing to report at this time, Mr. Chair.
Director of Planning.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And same with Council Liaison.
Same. Thank you.
I see that Madam Mayor is in attendance. Any comment?
I have nothing tonight either, thank you.
Okay, I also have nothing for an official report. Any correspondence and actions above over the emails that we received on this?
We did receive 2 more emails during that time, just that will be added to the record.
Okay, thank you. Poll members for comment. Mr. Chappaka?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. One of the comments I have in the emphasis put on a building. As an architect, man, I would love to have a building define a community. That would be a beautiful thing. If Sheetz went in 6 months down the road, you'd be driving by it, you're either going to be a patron or not. So I know there was a lot of passion involved. as you analyze a specific site or a building or a project, I don't think Sheets would have identified who Gahanna was. I think we would have gone above and beyond and kept our identity with or without this product. But I do want to echo Mr. Hicks' comments. Thank you very much for coming out. I would like to say, come out in support of something, because as we look at it, the quiet majority said they wanted it. So you can have as much strength and kind of tension and emotion on a yes vote also. So keep in mind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Polly?
I'll just echo what was just said. I also want to thank everybody for coming tonight and participating in our process. It's nice to see people active and passionate about something in the city and coming and making their positions clear. So hopefully people will continue to do so going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hicks?
No further comments, thank you.
Mr. Greenberg?
No further comments.
Mr. Soriano? Mr. Soriano?
No, just thanks, echo my commissioners, fellow commissioners' comments. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. And, you know, I think we all really care about Gahanna. I think this area that we discussed tonight is one of the highest potential areas in Gahanna. As an architect, you know, I'd love to see it be successful. So that's all.
Mr. DeMarkin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, thanks for coming out. I think, you know, we still have challenges ahead of us. This is now going to be a vacant lot with a vacant building, and something's going to happen there. Something needs to happen there. That whole strip of land needs some work and needs the right development. And we're not opposed to Sheets, and hopefully the Sheets does find another location in town in the fairly near future. And this strip of Granville Street, according to the land use plan, hopefully people do step up and develop it in accordance with the vision of the city. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So just a few closing comments. Again, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. Have not received that volume of email. My phone was dinging a lot. So again, just thank everyone for coming out and conducting yourself civilly. I know in this day and age that's sometimes the exception and not the rule. So just again, thank you for adhering to our rules of our commission. I am an optimist by nature, and I think that you know, as not only Gahanna but Central Ohio continues to grow and develop, that something will come into this corridor, and it'll be nice. So you know, I think the future is going to be bright, and again, I'm optimistic for it. And finally, I just want to recognize Mr. Hicks for ringing the bell.
Thank you.
So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.